Hi, I'm Barb, the Purdue Nutrition Education Advisor for Tippecanoe County, and today we are going to talk about planning meals and knowing what's for dinner. We have a real quick recipe that I like to fix when I don't know what to fix for dinner. So we're going to start with that. I'll tell you a little bit about it, and then we're going to go about how to plan meals and to get prepared. So this one is one, how many of us really don't like the statement, these three little words, what's for dinner, or what's for breakfast, or what's for lunch? When I have a big crowd, I hate that word because I know I have to have a lot of food. When it's just 2 or 3 of us, it's not as bad because I can pull some things together, but that is a statement in my house that I don't like. So planning meals is extremely important, and I have found, especially through the COVID time period, that it's been even more important so that I could use leftovers more efficiently. I could use things that I have in my pantry as opposed to having to go and purchase other things. So planning was really critical during these last 12 months. And I really, as we talk about this, thinking about how you use food pantries, how you use your food stamp dollars is critical, because it seems like there's never enough of any of that during this pandemic. So this one is easy. It also could be made for a snack for children when they get home from school, if they just want something that's a little healthy. But oftentimes when I don't know what to have for dinner, we end up having breakfast for dinner. And that one is always a hard one when you're planning breakfast to get all of the food groups. So this one little piece here is easy to get most of the food groups, and I'm going to tell you how you can kind of add some. So today I'm making an applesauce French toast. And when I make this, oftentimes I will also put other fruits in it. So I might have leftover strawberries or blueberries, and I will crush those up in my applesauce so that I put extra fruit into this recipe. I also then have I'm not going to make this today, but I have an any berry sauce recipe that sometimes I will make that ahead to put on top of these, or to put on waffles, or to put on French toast. Just so I get the fruit in there for the family. So this recipe, it takes 2 eggs, half a cup of non-fat milk, cinnamon, sugar, vanilla, unsweetened applesauce, and then bread. So what I've done today, the applesauce that we are using is applesauce that I made from apples that were going to go bad. And when I have apples that are going to go bad, I like to core them, peel them, and put them in some water and steam them for maybe a half hour with the lid on. And then I take my immersion blender and I chop them up so it's kind of chunky. If I really want it really, really smooth, I'll put it in my blender and blend it that way. But I like to use I almost always have fresh applesauce because we don't seem to eat the apples as fast as we get them. But it's a good way to use applesauce, and I put nothing in it. I put no cinnamon, no sugar. It is just straight apples, and it is so sweet that oftentimes also I will go ahead and leave the peel on the apple and just put that in also, because a lot of nutrients are in the apple peel. So I like to use my apples that way as opposed to opening up a can of applesauce. So in my applesauce here, I have the cinnamon, the sugar, and the vanilla. And you could also put almond in instead of the vanilla if you like that flavor, if you have it. And if you don't have either one, it's okay to make this without having that vanilla in there. So you're going to take your applesauce, you're going to take your milk. Like I said, I put the cinnamon and the vanilla and the sugar in my applesauce. So you're going to mix that all together, and then we're going to put our egg in it. Today I'm only making a half a recipe, so it doesn't go to waste because we don't have anybody here in class with us. But as you can see, I have fresh eggs from my friend. I also like to, on the bread, I will set it out and let it get a little bit stiffer, especially if it's fresh bread. or fresh, you know, you just purchased it and you need to, it's too soft to make French toast out of. So I will set it out maybe the night before, or I'll just put it in the bag like this and I'll leave the bag open. And the other thing that I do a lot of times is when I get to the bottom of the bag of bread, I will just put it all in one bag together. So I'll have odds and ends, so you never know what you're going to get. But it's always fun to use up those extra pieces. You can freeze it and bring it out of the freezer also when you're doing this. But the other piece of this, when I'm making this French bread, I know at the food pantries a lot of time you get maybe 1 or 2 samples of breads that you can take. I would suggest if they have a raisin bread that you take the raisin bread, because that's just going to add more fruits to your French toast. And don't be afraid to take any kind of bread that's there, because you can chop it up and make French toast with it. You can also take this recipe and like when I have the odds and ends, I may chop all the bread up instead of having an actual piece of French toast, and I will put it in here with crumbs, and then I'll put it in a baking dish, and I might make an extra layer of this to put on top of it and bake it for just a few minutes, and I have a baked French toast. And usually if I do that, I'll make it the night before. My grandkids love it because it's really ooey, so really good. So today we're just using a little bit of buttery spray, so there's not a lot of calories to this on our skillet. And then we are going to set our bread in this mixture. Now my husband loves to put this in, and then he likes to have extras so he can have the egg mixture cooked at the end if we have anything left. So oftentimes we'll have some eggs that are kind of sweet, but we're still not throwing the eggs away. So one of the things that I have recommended to a couple of my classes is to make this with the applesauce, and then instead of putting any syrup or anything on it, to just take a little bit of honey and peanut butter and mix it together, and then spread that on top of this. And that way you're getting more protein than just the egg. And it's truly, you've gotten almost all the food groups by just having this one piece put together. So after this is soaked, and if our skillet is warm enough, I'm going to let it warm up just a little bit more. You then put it in and you brown it, and you're ready to go. So it's an easy snack. My teenage grandkids can make this one with no problem. I think this bread's going to be a little bit soft on me. But they come home from school, and this may be a snack for them when they come home from school. So planning meals is really, really critical so that we don't end up having to have something like this for a meal. There's nothing wrong with it, but it really should be the go-to after you don't know what to fix. So the first thing I like to talk about when we're planning meals is, what do we have in our pantry? And that's the first place I start. I go to the pantry. I might put down some ideas of some things that I would like to have, but then I go to the pantry. And the best thing also is, as we're using the pantries, the food finders, or the different food pantries in town, is you kind of know what they're going to have from week to week, or you know they're going to have some meat in their bread, and you know what you're going to get. I like to say, don't go to the grocery store and use your SNAP dollars until you've gone to the food pantry. That way you're not buying the same thing that you could have gotten at the food pantry, so you're not wasting your SNAP dollars. And that's really one of those things that it's really, when you get that money, it's real common to want us to just run to the grocery store and buy the things we need, whereas we can go to the food pantry and pick up the things that we need before we go and spend that money at the grocery store. So we're going to hopefully make this work. This piece is going to fall apart because it's so saturated. And the other thing you can do after you have let this soak for a little bit, you can always pour the extra on top, which is probably what I'm going to do with this piece so it doesn't get as soft. You want to use as much of it as you can. And all we're going to do is we are just going to let that cook on each side and get as brown as it can, and then it's going to be ready to go. So planning meals, though, as we go back to that, is knowing what you have in the pantry. So if you have beans or you have canned vegetables, you can always say, you know, I can make vegetable soup with some beans in it. Just looking at it and saying, what can I make out of what I have is my first plan. And then I put that down on my list of the things that I have. Then I usually will include, if my grandkids are with us, they get to help plan those meals, because if they help plan the meals, they're going to be more apt to eat them. But we know we have to have 6 ounces of protein a day and 2 to 3 cups of fruits and vegetables. So trying to get all of that in is sometimes a challenge. And that's where I like to just go through and I'll take my planning sheet and I'll put protein, fruits, vegetables, and grains, so that I know I've got all the categories, and milk, that I've got all the categories covered. That way then I can then not have, hopefully have the same thing day after day. Oh, you know, especially for breakfast. How easy is it to have the same thing for breakfast every day of the week? I have one of my students who has oatmeal every day, and she said, I'm always tired. I said, well, put some fruit in it, put some peanut butter in it, do something that jazzes it up a little bit. It's okay to have the same thing, but we do grow tired of eating the same thing day in and day out. So once I've got the plan, or what I think I'm going to have, I usually have everybody look at it and say, is this okay? I try to pick, when my grandkids are with me, things that I know they're all going to like a lot, and then we go from there. Knowing that meat is the most expensive typically is usually where I start. And I don't always have meat for every meal. Sometimes we just have the beans, or we have a little bit of meat that's left over from something. Also, when I plan meals, I plan leftovers. I plan so that the next day I can have lunch off of something I had the night before. Or I like to cook extra chicken so I can have salads a couple of days. Some days I'll have chicken on them and some not. So it's really, how can I make that go further? Or if I'm having boiled eggs for breakfast, I always boil 2 extras so that I can make either egg salad later, I can make tuna salad, or I can cut them up and put them on my salads. So planning meals, and that's when you use this sheet that says know what's for dinner, your main dish, your side dishes, and that's probably where I put my proteins and my vegetables, and then I give a list every day. So if for some reason we decide that we're not going to have dinner at home tonight, that our daughter's having us over for dinner, then I will look and say, to see what I have put on that meal that I might be able to move to another meal, or we may just scoot off a meal that we weren't really excited about, but we still need to have it, okay? And I become really creative of how to use those leftovers so that I can either make a pot pie if I've had a roast. If I have extra hamburger and mashed potatoes, I'll usually make a shepherd's pie and put some peas and carrots and just jazz that all up so that the next day it doesn't taste like just a hamburger that I had. So when we plan to have all the food groups. And as I said, it's easy to not get all the food groups. And if you don't get all the food groups, it's also okay to add them in for your snacks. So this one right here, we've got eggs in it, which is going to give us protein. We've got a grain. We've got applesauce. Not a lot of applesauce because it's only a half a cup for 6 slices. So you're not going to get a full serving of applesauce, but you're going to get enough. And that's where I like to put the sauce on top. And so if I have strawberries or raspberries, or sometimes I just take the extra applesauce and I'll cook it for a while to make it into an apple butter, or if I have apple butter, we'll just put apple butter on top of this and eat it like with peanut butter and eat it like a sandwich. So it's fun to try different things. You don't have to just say, well, this is the only recipes I have. There's lots of recipes on the internet that you can use. There's lots of recipes that Food Finders has. Our Eat, Gather, and Go site for Purdue Extension has a ton of good recipes. and they're all friendly to someone who uses a food pantry or uses SNAP dollars. So looking at planning a meal, we really want to know if we have totally covered all of the food groups. And one of the things that the American Dietetics Association and the government has just put out is a new guidelines for our diet needs each day. And it really just showed us that there's a lot of things that we thought we were eating a lot of that maybe we shouldn't be eating as much of. So when you're eating and you're planning meals, or you're planning a meal that's going to have a pre-made meal, you want to think about how much protein might have been in that meal. You want to think about how much sodium is in that meal, as well as added sugars. And now on our labels, that is all there and tells us that we should only have X amount. So being aware of that and being aware that we don't want to overeat any of the bad things, the sodiums in that, on a regular basis. So cooking from home is easier and more fun. As you can see, it looks just like regular French toast, but it just has a little taste of apple, and you really don't need to put any syrup on it. And that's one of the best things, is because that syrup is just going to add added sugars. When you look at a recipe or on a label, the first thing you read sometimes is sugar, and if that's what you're seeing, then you know that's what is the highest quantity in that recipe. So taking this and using the applesauce, you have given it sweetness that you're looking for, but you've not added the extra calories. So it's a fun recipe to use, and you can do it in a lot of different ways, but planning and knowing how you're going to use this. So I oftentimes will put down at the bottom, these are alternatives that we might have. So I know I have that bag of bread that's in the freezer. So I could make these. I also usually know that I have some apples that I've not used, or some bananas. You can mash up your bananas that are turning black and putting in this. So it just really gives it a different dimension than just regular old French toast. And I think sometimes we get in a rut and we think this is all I can have. And as I've taught this class over the last few years, most people say, well, we have the same thing every week. Well, if you plan your meals, you probably won't have the same thing every week, because you're going to see that you're repeating every week. You may have some favorite menus, recipes, and those are the ones I typically have week after week. I'm not a good leftover person, so I have to have a couple of days. So I usually, and thankfully, have enough room that I can freeze some things, so that I can go to the freezer and pull that lasagna out or that vegetable soup out a week later, and it tastes good and sounds good. Whenever I make soup, I highly recommend, if you have the quantity to be able to make a double batch, so you can, and if you have room, that you can freeze that other batch. So that, on a good cold day, and you don't want, you've got soup down, but you don't want to have to go to the pantry to see what kind of canned soup you have. If you have homemade soup, you're not going to have the sodium, you're not going to have the extra additives in it that canned does, so it's really healthier for you if you have the room to do it. Always making sure that you have all the recipes available. Like I said, when I have all my grandkids, which are 13 of us together, I have all the recipes for the 2 weeks, because they spend 2 weeks with us in the summer. They haven't this year because of COVID, but typically they spend 2 weeks with us, and I have the meals planned for every day. And I have all the recipes there also, so that I know when I go to the grocery store, I'm looking to see who has eggs on sale, because I'll probably go through 6 dozen eggs in 2 weeks with 13. It's kind of like cooking for a camp. So I'm looking for things that are on sale. And if you have a cell phone, there is an app that you can, for free, that you can download to, and it's called Flip. And it has all the ads for all the grocery stores in your area. And it also shows you what coupons are available in your area. So if you need to buy eggs, I'll just put in eggs at the top, and it'll show me all the different stores that have eggs on sale. Luckily, I have a homegrown source that I don't have to buy from the grocery store. But again, if you're picking them up at the pantry and you want to have them a larger quantity, you can know that you need to use some of your dough. I think you can get 2 choices of eggs when you go to the grocery store or to the food finders. So knowing what you need is really important when you go to the grocery store as you're planning. So if you need some fresh fruit or some fresh vegetables, you can have that in your plan, but you don't have to necessarily spend your money on that if you go to the food pantry first. And that's why I suggest when we go to the food pantry first that we know what we need, so that we just don't pick up random things and then get home and say, oh, well, I've got some noodles and I've got some raisins and whatever. And as often as you can go to Food Finders Food Pantry, there should be a really nice selection for you to have a full pantry most of the time. And truly looking at that and knowing how to use it and to not be afraid to be creative. That's really the big thing. Just like this recipe, I've tried it a bunch of different ways, and every time it turns out a little different, but it's okay. It's not, it never tastes bad. It just tastes different. And some of my family like it one way and some like it the other. And that's why I keep changing the recipes up. As you get things, fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, I know in the spring and the summer we will have gardens throughout the community that you can go and work a little bit in them, and you can pick fruits and vegetables out of them to take home with you. And I highly encourage you to do that, because there's it seems like there's always a shortage of some fruit or vegetable when you go to the grocery store. So if you can pick some of those up in the gardens around town, that's also a great way to use the resources that we have in the area. Planning meals, though, comes down to, do I have time? And I guess when I've been through COVID this year, I've had more time than I would like to think of. So having those meals planned just took one less stress off of me when it came time to fix the meal. And it also took stress off me when I went to the grocery store, because I didn't have to spend as much time at the grocery store. For those who are doing, and this is me, that I have ordered most of my food for the last year, having that plan made it real simple for me to go in and go to whatever store I was ordering groceries from and put that order together. And then knowing that a lot of times things that I would put in on that order I may not get. So I had to have a backup plan that I might not get that food if I picked it up, or if I went to the grocery store or sent my husband in, he might come home and say they didn't have such and such because they were out of it. So what's my alternative plan to make sure that I still have a healthy meal for my family? So that's where sometimes I have to switch the plans around. That's where I have to use a different produce or a different meat or a different fruit to make that meal work. But at the same time, most of the time I can make everything work. It's just that I had to plan. I had to take that time, that extra effort that maybe we didn't have to take before we got into COVID, that we now can take that time to try to make sure that everything is healthy for us and that we're eating as well as we possibly can. So with this toast, I would probably put a little bit of fruit beside it, a glass of milk, or sometimes I put yogurt on top of it. So it's really, or I use it and I dip my yogurt in, I dip my toast in my yogurt. My grandkids like for me to cut it into slices and then they dip it in their yogurt as opposed to eating it. I think they think they're like camping or something because they don't have to use utensils and they don't have to do the dishes afterwards. So it's just a fun way to think of a different meal for you and to use the resources that you have. So I just encourage everyone, if you aren't using the food pantry, to use the food pantries that we have in town. Also to use the mobile food pantries as they are up and running again, as well as signing on to take some of the courses that are offered now through Zoom or through the other sources that we have available through Food Finders. It's a great way to stay connected. It's a great way to find some tips that maybe people are using right now that they might not have used before we got into this pandemic. So I thank all of you and just hope that I see all of you back in classes sooner than later. Have a good day.